First of all, will your PowerPoint presentations be better than Andrew Cuomo's? Number one. And and also, what would be the American scorecard for New York City? What are like the tenets of success? How are we going to measure it? What are the top priorities that we should be measuring to see that New York City is going in the right direction?
Thank you, Paget. One reason I was so excited about running for mayor was that you actually can implement a lot of the things that I was running on nationally, including a scorecard. And I've already been to several communities that have really been devastated by the pandemic, but also were not in great shape pre-pandemic. And if you looked at how their children were doing or rates of maternal and infant mortality, they're totally unconscionable and unacceptable even pre-pandemic. So those are the kind of data points we should be using. We should have been using the whole time, would be around childhood success rates and healthy development in various ways, both physically and mentally, for a lot of people in New York City. And the data is going to be, frankly, staggeringly poor, like when we actually put it out there. And one thing I'm excited about is New York City actually has its own Department of Economic Data and Analysis. If New York City was was a country, it would be the 11th biggest economy in the world. Talking about GDP in the metro area of like 1.8 trillion, and it's got its own Department of Economic Analysis. So we're going to have a scorecard. We're going to have PowerPoint decks. We're going to start putting them out there. But one of the things that I also realize is that if we do have data and scorecards, it's probably going to have to be neighborhood specific, because the situations vary so dramatically across neighborhoods. Like each neighborhood has its own feel, set of issues, texture. It's really been fascinating on that level. But yeah, it's going to be very data heavy, and we're going to put out really just how bad things are, and then try and change them.
So Andrew, I wanted to just ask about strategy. So only about 12% of registered Democrats came out to vote in the last mayoral primary, and 70.
I think it might even be lower than that. No, 12% sounds about right. All right, let's say 12%.
It was under. It was 11 point something. I did the math, but
I'm so glad you did the math, Paget. This is
I know.
Great.
Well,
this is
I got it.
Us.
And but what was a little bit strange to me is that 75% of them voted for de Blasio, despite the fact that it seemed as though he was a pretty unpopular sort of political figure, at least among most New York City residents, like at least at the end of the term. So is changing the electorate going to be an essential part of your strategy in winning? Like, how do we accomplish this? Because you did very well in that poll, but like that is the general population of New York City residents, whereas they're probably not represented in the people who actually come out to vote in the mayoral primary. So, how do we help accomplish this? And can you just talk a little bit around that?
Well, I'd love to, Paget. So I'd say there are three groups of people that we're targeting. And the first group are the folks who are in the 11.5% you're talking about, who are like really regular New York City mayoral voters. And most of like I am not in that 11.5% historically, like that. Like so there are the folks who've been hardcore in New York City politics. They tend to be a little bit older, and we need to make our case to them. And they're going to listen to community leaders. They're going to listen to folks who represent them. So I need to work very hard to make my case to community leaders, to people directly, in various ways. Now, I'm happy to say that we actually do have like a reasonable base of support within that group. Like if you look at I guess the number would be somewhere around like, let's call it 700,000 to 800,000 regular voters, maybe a little lower. It's maybe like 670,000 New York City residents who vote. I'm like still reasonably popular. And one thing that helped me with that group, their average age is in the 50s. Was the fact that I was on CNN a lot, because a lot of them watch a lot of CNN, and then they're like, oh, that guy, he's like pretty reasonable. So that's group one, and we have to work very hard to get them, and that's a lot of like the socializing with community leaders and elected officials and endorsements. The second group are the many, many registered Democratic voters in New York City who would get out to vote for Joe Biden, but do not get out to vote in the mayoral. And can we activate a bunch of those people? I'm pretty confident we can. Like I actually was joking with someone. I'm like the ideal messenger for that group because like I'm one of them. It's like like I'd vote in the national. So like but I wasn't voting in the mayoral. So it's like, hey guys, like you might want to show up. So Bill de Blasio, if you look at the numbers, I think he won the primary with like something like 280,000 votes. In a city of 8.3 million. I mean, that's like a very, very small fraction. It's like a fraction of a fraction. And so we're just going to need a lot more folks who don't vote in local elections to vote this time. And I think that they will, because I think this election is going to be higher profile. I think we're going to be able to make the case to them. And then the third group is people who just aren't registered to vote and like have been like completely disengaged. And there's one group in particular that interests me in that category, which is Asian Americans, because Asian Americans are voting at something like half of the level of some other communities. I mean, there's a lot of room to grow. Asians, there's a lot of room to grow. So, so to the extent that we're trying to register new voters and activate new folks, like there are, we're interested in every group, but I think Asian Americans would be the first place.
So actually, some people have noticed that you kind of have a change in your tone in the way you campaign. You seem more confident, maybe even like less apologetic and just more assertive, even just against attacks in the face of some random attacks online and otherwise. Is this part of a campaign strategy? Was this a conscious decision, or is this just like a natural evolution of your experience in politics and what we've seen from your experience, in your presidential campaign? Are you just having more fun?
I am enjoying myself, so thank you for noticing, Paget. It's certainly not part of some, strategic decision. It's me kind of responding the way that I naturally respond. This is a very different race, and I'm a very different figure within that race. So one of the things that's very real is that there was zero upside in attacking Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate. You know what I mean? Like that was no one's like, what you really need to do is kneecap Yang. Like that's the path to success. So like I always be hang out. And even the reverse was true. Like when there was when I would get into an exchange with Elizabeth Warren or Bernie on the debate stage, they would just drop it immediately because they were like, there is zero upside to me exchanging with Yang. There was zero upside to anyone exchanging with Yang. Plus, I got along with most of the other candidates pretty well. Now, I believe I would get along with most of the mayoral candidates pretty well too on a personal level. Like I've met a couple of them, and they're like really great people. I tend to give people who run for office the benefit of the doubt because it's such like a difficult undertaking that a lot of people are actually doing it for very altruistic reasons. And so for me to get attacked in this race, it's just a very different thing where there actually is political upside to attacking me in this race, like a great deal of political upside, as it turns out, for other people. And so then I have to respond to it in a way that puts people in a place where they're confident in me and my leadership, and would be confident in my leadership as mayor. I think that's actually maybe the biggest learning or evolving I have already had to do. Which is, and this is something I appreciate a great deal, which is if I was just a voter who didn't really know Yang from a whole lot, I would want to know that Yang is going to have confidence in his own decisions and stick to his stick to his beliefs. And if someone yells at him, he'll be like, that's cool. We're just going to keep doing this, because I think it's right. I actually think that is intrinsic to the job of being mayor of New York City. I think if you were the mayor of New York City and you make a good decision, there's someone that's going to be very, very pissed off about it, because it's a very big, diverse city. And so you actually would want to know that a mayor is not going to buckle under criticism. So I think that that's actually really awesome about what's already happened in this race, is that people feel to the extent that they wanted to see that in me, then they're like, okay, Yang's pretty fine, with someone criticizing or having there's actually my favorite thing image so far from this campaign has been Like I was in the subway with my team going back, and then there was this guy reading the New York Daily News, and the headline was me, and it was like a critical headline. It was like, Yang takes flack for da 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 da. And so then like I stood next to the headline, being like, hey, look, like it's I made the paper, and like and I'm not sure if people could zoom in on the article and notice that it was like actually like not a very flattering headline. But I think that the fact that I would see that and be fine with it, which I genuinely was. I was actually more amused by seeing the headline than anything else. Like I think that's what they want in a mayor. It's like if you had a mayor that was like reading those headlines, being like, like I mean, right now with this crisis, like that would be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, people are saying it's working, so it's great.
Oh, thanks, Paget.